Morning in Mushin came alive with noise before the sun even rose. Roosters crowed, traders pushed wheelbarrows piled with goods, and women swept the streets with stiff brooms. Daniel woke up early, heart pounding with excitement and nerves. Today was not like any other day. Today, Mr. Richard would return. He sat on the edge of the mat, staring at the faint light through the curtain. His siblings still slept, their faces soft and calm. Blessing's hand rested on his arm, as if holding on to him even in dreams. Chinedu snored lightly, clutching his broken toy car. Daniel smiled, but his stomach churned. Could it really be true? Would a rich man really return to a boy from Mushin? His mother, Evelyn, was already awake, folding clothes and humming a soft hymn. She glanced at him and saw his restless eyes. "My son," she said gently, "God has opened a door. Walk through it with humility and courage." Daniel nodded, though he wasn't sure his legs would carry him steadily when the moment came. By 8 o'clock, the sound of a car horn at the mouth of the street made neighbors peep from their windows. A black SUV, different from the one that had burned, rolled to a stop. The driver, a middle-aged man in neat clothes, stepped out and opened the back door. Out came Mr. Richard, his tall frame dressed in a crisp shirt and trousers. Beside him was a woman in a bright yellow dress, her hair styled neatly, gold earrings catching the sunlight. She smiled warmly, scanning the small yard until her eyes landed on Daniel. "Good morning," Richard greeted, his deep voice carrying authority but softened with kindness. Evelyn hurried forward, wiping her hands nervously on her wrapper. "Good morning, sir. Good morning, madam. You are welcome." "This is my wife, Margaret," Richard introduced. "She insisted on meeting the boy who saved me." Margaret stepped closer to Daniel and bent slightly so her eyes met his. "So you're Daniel," she said. Her voice was smooth, filled with genuine warmth. "Richard told me everything. You are very brave." Daniel blushed and lowered his gaze. "Good morning, Ma," he mumbled. Margaret smiled and touched his shoulder lightly. "From today, you're part of our family too." The neighbors whispered among themselves. Some stood openly in the yard now, pretending to be busy but clearly watching. Evelyn guided their guests to the plastic chairs, offering water quickly. "We have a plan," Richard said after they settled. "Today, Daniel will come with us. We'll take him for a medical checkup, then shopping for school clothes and supplies. Tomorrow, we'll meet the principal of a good school near our estate." Evelyn's eyes shone, though worry lingered at the edges. "Sir, he has been out of school for some time. I don't know if he will catch up. That's why we'll also get him a tutor," Margaret assured her. "No child is too far behind if he has the right help." Daniel's chest swelled. He wanted to shout with joy, but he only nodded quickly. "I will work hard," he promised, his voice steady this time. Richard smiled. "I believe you." They rose to leave. Blessing clutched Daniel's hand. "Will you come back tonight?" she whispered. "I don't know," Daniel admitted, "but I will see you soon." Chinedu tugged his shirt. "Bring pencil for me," he shouted with the boldness of a child. Everyone laughed, the tension easing. The ride in the SUV felt like another world. Daniel sat in the back seat, eyes wide, touching the soft leather cautiously. Outside, Mushin's crowded streets gave way to wider roads, flyovers, and tall buildings. The air inside the car smelled faintly of leather and citrus. The AC cooled his skin, so different from the burning sun outside. Margaret turned to him often with questions. "What subjects do you enjoy?" "Mathematics," he replied quickly. "And stories." She nodded approvingly. "That's wonderful. Numbers will take you far, and stories will remind you of who you are." At the hospital, Daniel underwent a full checkup. Nurses weighed him, measured him, and checked his eyesight. The doctor, surprised at the attention for a boy clearly from the streets, raised an eyebrow at Richard, but said nothing after seeing the determination in the man's face. Daniel was declared healthy, though underweight. "Plenty of good food will fix that," the doctor said. From there, they drove to a shopping complex in Ikeja. Daniel could barely breathe as they entered a store filled with polished shelves and bright lights. He had never seen so many clothes in one place. Margaret guided him gently. "Choose 2 pairs of trousers, 3 shirts, shoes, and a bag. Don't worry about the cost." Daniel hesitated, picking items too small at first, afraid to reach for the better ones. Margaret noticed and said firmly, "Daniel, lift your head. You are worthy of good things. Choose what you like, not what you fear." Her words sank deep. Slowly, he picked a sturdy backpack, neat black shoes, and a set of crisp white shirts. When he tried them on, he stared at himself in the mirror, hardly recognizing the boy staring back. For the first time, he looked like a student again, not a hawker dodging traffic. They bought notebooks, pencils, textbooks, and even a small calculator. Richard added a tablet device, insisting it would help with studies. Daniel's hands shook when he held it. "Sir, this is too much," he whispered. "It's just the beginning," Richard said firmly. By evening, they returned to the Lawson estate in Lekki. Daniel's jaw dropped as the gates opened to reveal wide lawns, a sparkling fountain, and tall palm trees swaying gently. The mansion gleamed, so different from the crowded yard he had left that morning. Inside, Grace and David waited curiously. Grace eyed Daniel with quiet interest, while David ran up with open excitement. "So you're the boy who saved Dad. Wow, you're like a superhero." Daniel smiled nervously. "I'm just Daniel," he said. "You'll be my friend," David declared at once. "We can play football in the garden." Grace rolled her eyes but said softly, "Welcome." The Lawson home was overwhelming. Soft carpets, shining chandeliers, walls covered with paintings. Daniel followed cautiously, afraid to touch anything. Margaret showed him a guest room prepared for him, with a bed, a desk, and a wardrobe. "This will be yours during school days," she said. Daniel stood frozen at the doorway. He had never had a room to himself. His throat tightened. "Thank you, Ma," he whispered. That night, as he lay on the soft bed, sleep would not come easily. His mind swirled with images. The fire, his mother's tears, the shopping bags, the shining school shoes. He wondered if it was a dream. But then he remembered Richard's steady voice. "You will go to school." The fire on the road had destroyed one car, but it had lit a new fire in his life, one that promised a future brighter than he had ever imagined. The morning sun spilled over Lekki, turning the rooftops golden as birds chirped in the palm trees. Inside the Lawson mansion, the household buzzed with its own rhythm. Grace prepared for school with her usual calm efficiency, packing her laptop and books. David bounded around with too much energy, complaining about his tie. Margaret gave instructions to the housemaid, while Richard sipped coffee, scanning emails on his tablet. And then there was Daniel. He stood in front of the mirror in his new uniform, staring at himself as though the reflection belonged to someone else. A crisp white shirt, navy blue trousers, polished black shoes, and a tie that hung stiffly around his neck. He smoothed the shirt again, afraid it might wrinkle. "Relax," Margaret said kindly as she entered the room. "You look perfect, handsome and smart." Daniel blushed, lowering his gaze. "Thank you, Ma." Breakfast was another experience that morning. A large dining table stretched across the room, covered with toast, eggs, sausages, and fresh juice. Daniel hesitated at the edge until Richard beckoned him. "Sit, Daniel. You're part of the family now." He sat gingerly, careful not to spill anything. Grace offered him a small smile from across the table, while David grinned openly. "Don't worry," the boy said. "The eggs taste better than beans." Daniel laughed nervously. then bit into the toast. The buttery crunch melted on his tongue. He had eaten bread before, but never like this. Soon, the driver arrived to take the children to school. Daniel's heart pounded as they drove through Lecky's clean streets, past estates with high gates and guards. This was not Mushin. Here, the roads were smoother, the buildings taller, the air quieter. The car pulled up to a tall white building with a wide gate and a sign that read, Lakeside Academy, Excellence in Learning. Students in neat uniforms streamed inside, some carrying laptops, others chatting with confidence. Daniel's palms sweated. Would he fit in? Would they laugh at him if they learned where he came from? Walk tall, Richard's voice echoed in his mind. You are worthy. Inside the school, the principal, a dignified man in glasses, greeted them warmly. Ah, Mr. Lawson. Always a pleasure. And this must be young Daniel. Yes, Richard said proudly. He will be joining immediately. Please make all arrangements, tutors, extra classes, whatever is needed. I want him to succeed. Of course, the principal assured, shaking Daniel's hand firmly. Welcome, my boy. Work hard and you'll thrive here. The first day felt like stepping onto another planet. The classrooms were large, with bright windows and desks that gleamed. Teachers used projectors and smartboards. Students carried tablets instead of worn notebooks. The air smelled faintly of disinfectant and fresh paint. Daniel sat in the back at first, unsure of himself. Some students glanced at him curiously. A few whispered, "New boy." Grace's classmates waved politely at her but gave Daniel longer looks, sizing him up. In mathematics class, the teacher asked him a question to test his level. Daniel's heart hammered, but he answered confidently, solving the problem in his head. The teacher raised his brows. Impressive, he said. Very good. A ripple of surprise ran through the class. At lunch, Daniel sat quietly until David dragged him to their table. This is Daniel, David announced proudly to his friends. He's my brother now. The children laughed, unsure, but curiosity soon replaced hesitation. Where did you come from? One boy asked. Mushin, Daniel answered simply. The boy blinked, then shrugged. Cool. Do you play football? Daniel smiled slowly. Yes. And just like that, the wall between them cracked a little. Still, not everyone was welcoming. Grace's friend Tolu raised an eyebrow when Daniel passed. Where did your dad pick this one from? She whispered. Grace frowned, choosing not to reply. That night, she would think long about how quickly people judged by background. As weeks turned into months, Daniel adjusted. The shock of polished classrooms and digital tools faded into daily rhythm. He worked harder than anyone, staying up late with tutors, catching up on missed years. Mathematics remained his favorite, but he discovered a love for literature too, the way stories could carry truths across time. At home, evenings were filled with new experiences. He dined with the Lawsons, sometimes nervously, but growing more comfortable. Margaret often asked about his mother and siblings, reminding him they would never be left behind. On weekends, the driver took him back to Mushin, where he proudly showed Blessing and Chinedu his books and told them stories of the new world he was learning in. One Saturday, he sat under the mango tree in the yard, explaining fractions to Chinedu with bottle tops. Blessing listened too, wide-eyed. One day I'll go to a school like yours, she said softly. You will, Daniel promised. We'll all rise together. Back in Lecky, Richard watched the boy with quiet pride. Daniel's presence had changed more than the boy's life. It had touched Richard too. The businessman found himself pausing more often, seeing the city differently. When he passed hawkers on the road now, he no longer rolled his windows higher. He remembered Daniel's small, urgent hands pulling him to safety. He remembered that lives could cross in the unlikeliest places. One evening, as he tucked away files from work, Richard told Margaret, Daniel reminds me of myself at that age, hungry to learn, determined. Maybe God sent him to remind me not to forget where I came from. Margaret smiled. And maybe God sent you to remind him that dreams can come true. Daniel grew into the new world with humility and quiet strength. Yet, deep inside, he never forgot the street he came from. The smell of roasted corn, the cries of hawkers, the weight of oranges on his head. They were part of him, roots that would always ground him, even as branches stretched toward the sky. Years do not move slowly in Lagos. They rush forward like Danfo buses in the early morning, loud and unstoppable. For Daniel, each year since the fire felt like another chapter in a story he had once only dreamed of. The boy who once carried a tray of oranges now carried books, pens, and ambition. At Lakeside Academy, Daniel rose quickly. What he lacked in background, he made up for in determination. Teachers noticed his sharp mind and steady discipline. Students, once curious or dismissive, began to respect him. By the end of his first full year, he was top of his class in mathematics and among the best in English. At home in Mushin, his mother Evelyn watched with tears of joy. Every weekend when Daniel returned, he brought stories of exams, debates, and even school excursions to museums and parks. He carried hope back into the small yard, planting it like seeds in his siblings' hearts. Blessing began to dream of becoming a doctor, while Chinedu announced boldly that he would one day design cars that never caught fire. The Lawsons had kept every promise. Richard paid for everything: school fees, books, uniforms, even a tutor who visited the Mushin home once a week to teach Blessing and Chinedu. Margaret often sent groceries and clothes to Evelyn, refusing to let her struggle alone. Still, Daniel remained humble. He helped his mother in the yard, played with his siblings, and never boasted about Lekki life. "We are one family," he told them often. "My feet walk 2 streets, but my heart is the same." Grace, once cautious about him, grew to admire his perseverance. She saw how he studied late into the night, never taking his opportunities for granted. David adored him completely, often following him around like a shadow, learning football tricks and homework tips. Richard, too, changed. The man who once rolled up his windows against hawkers now rolled them down to buy something, smiling and greeting the children who reminded him of Daniel. He became more patient in traffic, more generous in charity, more aware of the world beyond tinted glass. One evening, 2 years after the fire, Richard stood in the yard of Evelyn's home in Mushin. A small crowd of neighbors had gathered, clapping and cheering. Daniel had just been announced as the best student in Lagos State's mathematics competition. A medal hung around his neck, and his shy smile shone brighter than the bulb above the doorway. "From Mushin to the stage of Lagos," a neighbor declared proudly, "our Daniel has lifted our name." Evelyn's hand shook as she hugged her son. "I always knew," she whispered, tears wetting his shirt. "I always knew." Richard looked around at the cheering crowd and felt something swell inside him. It wasn't pride for himself. It was joy for a boy who had once pulled him from fire and was now blazing with a light of his own. As months turned into years, Daniel continued to climb. He gained admission into a prestigious university, supported fully by the Lawsons. On the day he left for campus, Blessing held his hand tightly. "Don't forget us," she pleaded. "I could never," Daniel said softly. "I carry you everywhere. One day, you will join me." At the university, Daniel studied engineering. He remembered Chinedu's bold dream of building safe cars and decided to make it his mission too. He poured his heart into learning, designing, and creating. His name began to appear in school journals and competitions. Meanwhile, Evelyn's life transformed as well. With support from the Lawsons, she expanded her small market stall into a shop. She sold more goods, employed 2 helpers, and earned enough to keep the family steady. Her dignity returned, not as charity, but his strength renewed. One Christmas, Richard brought his whole family to celebrate in Mushin. Instead of the usual polished estate decorations, they joined the neighbors in singing carols under the mango tree, sharing rice and stew cooked on a charcoal stove. Grace, usually quiet, laughed freely with Daniel's friends. David played football barefoot with Chinedu and the other children, his laughter ringing loud. Margaret helped Evelyn serve food, the two women chatting like sisters. Richard sat back, watching the mingling of two worlds. He remembered the day his SUV burned, the fear that gripped him, the small hand that pulled him to safety. He thought of how much had grown from that single act. Later that night, he pulled Daniel aside. "Do you know why I keep doing this?" he asked. Daniel shook his head. "Because you are kind?" Richard smiled faintly. "Because you reminded me of who I used to be, hungry, determined, unnoticed. You saved my life not only from fire, Daniel, but from forgetting my roots. That day, God used you for me as much as he used me for you." Daniel lowered his gaze, humbled. "I only did what anyone should do." "No," Richard said firmly. "Many people would have run the other way. You ran toward danger. That is courage. Never forget it." Years later, Daniel graduated with honors. His name was announced on stage, and the hall erupted in applause. Evelyn sat in the front row, her wrapper pressed neatly, tears flowing freely. Blessing and Chinedu waved their hands high, shouting, "That's our brother!" The Lawsons sat proudly beside them, Grace recording the moment on her phone, David cheering louder than anyone. When Daniel stepped forward to give his short speech, his voice shook at first. Then it steadied. "I stand here not as one boy alone, but as the son of a mother who never gave up, the brother of two children who believed in me, and the friend of a family who opened their hearts. I was once a boy selling oranges in traffic. Today, I am an engineer. Tomorrow, I will be more, but I will never forget where I came from or the fire that began this journey." The crowd rose to its feet, clapping and cheering. In that moment, Daniel knew his story was not just his. It belonged to his family, his neighbors, the Lawsons, and the city of Lagos itself. It was proof that even in chaos, even in fire, hope could rise. And so, the boy who once shouted, "Oga, fire day your motor," became a man whose life burned with light, not destruction. A fire that did not consume, but gave warmth. The fire on the road had started everything, and now it was fulfilled. The story of Fire on the Road teaches us that courage and kindness can come from anyone, no matter their background. A poor boy saved a rich man's life, proving that every person has value, and in return, the man's gratitude changed the boy's future. It reminds us never to look down on others, because true wealth is not measured by money, but by compassion and the lives we touch. Thank you for watching this story on Afro Tales TV. If you enjoyed it, please give it a thumbs up, leave us a comment, and share with friends and family. We have more beautiful stories coming your way, so subscribe and stay tuned. See you in the next one.